The Discovery. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the calm waters of the Caribbean. The research vessel Oceanic Explorer cut through the waves, its crew busy with their respective tasks. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe, a renowned marine biologist, stood on the deck, her binoculars trained on the distant horizon. She had been hired by the Maritime Heritage Foundation to investigate a mysterious shipwreck that had been spotted by a satellite. The wreck was unlike anything she had ever seen. A perfectly preserved pirate ship from the 1700s, adrift in the middle of the ocean. As the Oceanic Explorer approached the derelict vessel, Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. The ship was eerily intact, its sails still billowing in the wind, though they were tattered and frayed. The name on the hull was barely legible, but she could make out the words, "The Crimson Cutlass." The ship's wooden planks were weathered, but there was no sign of rot or decay. It was as if time had stood still for the vessel and its crew. Evelyn boarded the ship with a team of researchers, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The deck was littered with old cannons, crates of rum, and rusted cutlasses. But what caught her attention were the crew members. They were sprawled across the deck, their bodies perfectly preserved. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and their eyes were closed as if they were in a deep sleep. Evelyn knelt beside one of the crew members, a burly man with a long beard and a tricorn hat. She pressed her fingers to his neck, expecting to find no pulse. To her astonishment, she felt a faint, slow heartbeat. "This is impossible," she whispered, her mind racing. The crew wasn't dead. They were in a state of suspended animation. But how? And why? As Evelyn and her team began to explore the ship, they discovered a series of strange symbols carved into the wooden beams. The symbols seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. Evelyn felt a growing sense of unease as she studied them. She had seen similar symbols before, in ancient texts about lost civilizations and forbidden rituals. Whatever had happened to the crew of the Crimson Cutlass, it was no natural phenomenon. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, as if something deep within its bowels had stirred. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She turned to her team, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to get off this ship, now." But it was too late. The crew members began to stir, their eyes snapping open. They were no longer in a state of suspended animation. They were awake. And they didn't look happy. The awakening. The crew of the Crimson Cutlass rose slowly, their movements stiff and unnatural, as if they were puppets being pulled by invisible strings. Their eyes, once closed in eternal slumber, now glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. Evelyn and her team froze, caught between the instinct to flee and the scientific curiosity that had driven them to board the ship in the first place. "Stay calm," Evelyn whispered to her team, though her own heart was racing. "Don't make any sudden movements." The pirates, if they could still be called that, turned their heads in unison, their glowing eyes locking onto the intruders. The burly man with the tricorn hat, who Evelyn now realized must have been the captain, stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, guttural growl, as if it hadn't been used in centuries. "Who dares disturb our slumber?" he demanded, his words echoing with an otherworldly resonance. Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain composed. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Marlowe. We mean you no harm. We found your ship adrift and wanted to help." The captain's eyes narrowed, and he took another step closer. The air around him seemed to crackle with energy, and Evelyn could feel the weight of his gaze pressing down on her. "Help?" he repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Or plunder like the rest?" Before Evelyn could respond, one of her team members, a young marine archaeologist named Tom, panicked. He turned and bolted toward the edge of the ship, clearly intending to jump overboard and swim back to the Oceanic Explorer. The captain's hand shot out, and with a flick of his wrist, Tom was yanked backward as if by an invisible force. He landed hard on the deck, gasping for breath. "Nobody leaves," the captain said, his voice cold and final. Evelyn's mind raced. She needed to buy time to figure out what was happening and how to get her team out of this alive. "We didn't come here to steal from you," she said carefully. "We're scientists. We study the ocean and its history. Your ship, it's a miracle. It shouldn't exist, not after all these years. How is this possible?" The captain's expression softened slightly, though the glow in his eyes remained. "A miracle, you say?" he mused. "No, not a miracle. A curse." "A curse?" Evelyn repeated, her curiosity piqued despite the danger. "What kind of curse?" The captain turned and gestured for her to follow. "Come, I will show you." Evelyn hesitated, glancing back at her team. The other pirates had formed a loose circle around them, cutting off any chance of escape. She had no choice but to comply. "Stay here," she told her team. "I'll be back." She followed the captain below deck, her heart pounding with every step. The interior of the ship was even more surreal than the deck. The walls were lined with the same strange symbols she had seen earlier, but now they pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, as if the ship itself were alive. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and Evelyn could feel a strange energy vibrating through the wooden planks beneath her feet. The captain led her to a large, ornate door at the end of a narrow hallway. He pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on top of it sat a large, blackened chest. The chest was covered in intricate carvings, and the same symbols from the walls were etched into its surface. "This," the captain said, his voice heavy with bitterness, "is the source of our curse." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the chest. "What's inside?" The captain's expression darkened. "Open it, and you will see." Evelyn hesitated, her hand hovering over the lid of the chest. She could feel a strange pull, as if the chest were calling to her, urging her to open it. Against her better judgment, she lifted the lid. Inside was a large, glowing crystal, its surface swirling with dark, smoky tendrils. The moment the lid was opened, the crystal began to pulse with a malevolent energy, and Evelyn felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She stumbled back, clutching her head as visions flashed before her eyes. Visions of the ship's crew, screaming in agony as the crystal consumed them, trapping them in a state between life and death. "The heart of the abyss," the captain said, his voice filled with a mixture of reverence and hatred. "It grants power beyond imagination, but at a terrible cost. We sought to harness its power, but it consumed us instead. We have been trapped here for centuries, neither alive nor dead, until you woke us." Evelyn's mind reeled. "But how did we wake you? We didn't do anything." The captain's eyes bore into hers. "You brought the crystal's counterpart, the key to its prison." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone she had found on the deck earlier. It had seemed insignificant at the time, but now she could see that it bore the same symbols as the chest. This is the key?" The captain nodded. "And now that the crystal is free, so are we. But the curse is not broken. It is only beginning." Evelyn's heart sank. She had unwittingly unleashed something terrible, something that could not be contained. "What happens now?" The captain's lips curled into a grim smile. "Now, dear Marlowe, you will help us break the curse, or you will share our fate." The curse unveiled. Evelyn stared at the glowing crystal, her mind racing. The heart of the abyss pulsed with a sinister energy, its dark tendrils swirling like smoke trapped in glass. The captain's words echoed in her ears. "You will help us break the curse, or you will share our fate." She had no doubt he meant it. The crew of the Crimson Cutlass was no longer human, not entirely. They were something else, something bound to the crystal and the curse it carried. "How do I break the curse?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "If I'm going to help you, I need to know everything." The captain's glowing eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she thought he might refuse. But then he nodded, his expression grim. "Very well. But know this, Dr. Marlowe. The curse is not easily undone. It requires sacrifice." He gestured for her to sit on a nearby crate, and though every instinct screamed at her to run, Evelyn obeyed. The captain began to pace the room, his boots echoing against the wooden floor. 200 years ago, we were the most feared crew in the Caribbean. We plundered ships, amassed treasure, and lived as kings. But it wasn't enough. We wanted more power, more wealth, more life. That's when we heard the legend of the heart of the abyss. Evelyn leaned forward, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. What legend? The heart is said to be a gift from the sea itself, the captain explained. A relic of an ancient civilization that worshipped the ocean as a god. They believed the heart could grant immortality, but only to those who proved worthy. We tracked it down to a remote island, where it was guarded by a tribe of natives. We slaughtered them and took the heart for ourselves. Evelyn's stomach churned at the casual way he described the massacre, but she said nothing. The captain continued, his voice growing darker. We thought we had one. We brought the heart aboard this ship and performed the ritual to activate its power. But we were fools. The heart doesn't grant immortality. It consumes. It feeds on the life force of those who wield it, trapping them in a state of eternal torment. We became its prisoners, bound to this ship and to each other, unable to die but never truly alive. Evelyn's mind raced as she processed the information. So the crystal is alive? It's sentient. The captain nodded. It is a being of pure energy, a parasite that feeds on the souls of its hosts. And now that you've awakened it, it will not rest until it has consumed us all. Evelyn's heart sank. But why did it wake up now? What changed? The captain pointed to the small stone she still held in her hand. That is the key of the abyss. It was created by the ancient civilization to control the heart. When you brought it aboard, it disrupted the crystal's prison, allowing it to awaken. But the key is also the only way to destroy the heart, if you have the courage to use it. Evelyn looked down at the stone, her fingers tightening around it. How? The heart must be returned to the depths from which it came, the captain said. To the abyss, a trench so deep and dark that even the sea fears it. There, the key can be used to shatter the crystal and release its hold on us. But the journey is perilous, and the heart will fight to protect itself. It will manipulate your mind, your fears, your desires. Many have tried to destroy it. None have succeeded. Evelyn took a deep breath, her mind made up. I'll do it, but I need your help. The captain's lips curled into a grim smile. You have it. But know this, if you fail, the curse will claim you as it has claimed us. Evelyn and the captain returned to the deck, where her team was still surrounded by the crew. The pirate's glowing eyes followed her as she approached, their expressions unreadable. Evelyn addressed her team, her voice firm. We're going to help them break the curse, but it's going to be dangerous. If anyone wants to stay behind, now's the time to say so. No one spoke. Despite their fear, Evelyn's team trusted her implicitly. They nodded, their determination matching her own. The captain barked orders to his crew, and the ship sprang to life. The sails, though tattered, caught the wind, and the Crimson Cutlass began to move. Evelyn stood at the helm beside the captain, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The abyss lay to the south, in a part of the ocean so remote and treacherous that few ships dared to venture there. As the ship sailed on, Evelyn felt a growing sense of unease. The air grew colder, and the sky darkened, though it was only midday. The sea itself seemed to change, the waves becoming choppier and more erratic. And then there was the crystal. She could feel its presence, a constant pressure in the back of her mind, whispering to her in a language she couldn't understand. Hours passed, and the ship entered a dense fog. Visibility dropped to almost zero, and the crew grew tense. Evelyn could hear them muttering to each other in low, anxious voices. The captain's grip on the wheel tightened, his glowing eyes scanning the mist. We're close, he said. The abyss lies just ahead. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, as if it had struck something. Evelyn stumbled, grabbing the railing to steady herself. What was that? She demanded. The captain's expression was grim. The heart knows we're here, is fighting back. The fog began to swirl, forming shapes that twisted and writhed like living things. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the shapes coalesced into figures. Figures she recognized. Her parents, who had died in a car accident when she was a child. Her mentor, who had taken her own life after a failed research project. And then, worst of all, herself, but older, broken, and alone. "It's not real," Evelyn whispered, though her voice trembled. "It's just the crystal trying to mess with my head." But the figures didn't disappear. They stepped closer, their eyes filled with sorrow and accusation. "You failed us," her parents said in unison. "You couldn't save us." Evelyn clenched her fists, forcing herself to look away. "I won't let it control me," she said through gritted teeth. "I won't." The captain placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Stay strong, Dr. Marlowe. The heart preys on your weaknesses. You must resist." Evelyn nodded, taking a deep breath. She focused on the task at hand, pushing the visions to the back of her mind. The ship continued to move forward, the fog growing thicker and darker with every passing moment. And then, without warning, the fog cleared, revealing a sight that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Before them was a massive whirlpool, its churning waters black as ink. The abyss, the descent into the abyss. The whirlpool loomed before them, a gaping maw of churning black water that seemed to stretch endlessly into the depths. The roar of the vortex was deafening, and the ship trembled as it was pulled inexorably toward the edge. Evelyn gripped the railing, her knuckles white, as she stared into the abyss. The heart of the abyss pulsed in its chest, its dark tendrils writhing as if in anticipation. "This is it," the captain said, his voice barely audible over the noise. "The heart must be thrown into the abyss. Only there can the key be used to destroy it." Evelyn nodded, though her heart pounded with fear. She clutched the key of the abyss tightly, its smooth surface cold against her palm. "I'll do it," she said, though her voice wavered. "But how do I get close enough without being pulled in?" The captain's glowing eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something resembling respect in his gaze. "You'll need to take a small boat. The ship is too large, it will be swallowed whole. But the journey will be treacherous. The heart will do everything in its power to stop you." Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Then I'd better move quickly." The captain barked orders to his crew, and within minutes, a small rowboat was lowered into the water. Evelyn climbed down the ladder, her legs trembling with every step. Her team watched from the deck, their faces pale with fear. "Be careful," one of them called out, though his voice was swallowed by the roar of the whirlpool. Evelyn settled into the boat, the key clutched in one hand and the chest containing the heart in the other. The captain handed her an oar. "Row with all your strength," he said. "And whatever you do, don't look into the water." Evelyn nodded, though her stomach churned with dread. She pushed off from the ship and began to row, her muscles straining against the current. The whirlpool's pull was immense, and every stroke felt like a battle against an invisible force. The black water churned around her, and she could feel the heart's presence growing stronger, its whispers echoing in her mind. "You'll fail," it hissed. "You're weak. You'll never survive." Evelyn gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus. "I'm not weak," she muttered under her breath. "I've spent my life fighting for what I believe in. I won't let you win." The boat inched closer to the edge of the whirlpool, the roar of the water growing louder with every passing second. Evelyn's arms burned with exertion, but she refused to stop. She could see the center of the vortex now, a dark void that seemed to defy all logic and reason. It was as if the ocean itself had opened a doorway to another world. And then, just as she was about to reach the edge, the water around her began to churn violently. The boat rocked precariously, and Evelyn nearly lost her grip on the oar. She looked down and gasped. The black water was alive, forming shapes that twisted and writhed like serpents. They reached for her, their translucent bodies glistening in the dim light. "Don't look into the water," the captain's voice echoed in her mind, but it was too late. Evelyn's eyes were drawn to the creatures, their forms shifting and changing. They became faces, Faces of people she had known, people she had lost. Her parents, her mentor, even herself. Their eyes were filled with sorrow and accusation, their mouths opening in silent screams. "You failed us," they whispered. "You couldn't save us." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she was paralyzed. The boat rocked violently, and she realized with a start that she had stopped rowing. The whirlpool's pull was growing stronger, dragging her closer to the edge. "No!" she shouted, shaking her head to clear the visions. "You're not real. You're just trying to stop me." She gripped the oar tightly and began to row again, her muscles screaming in protest. The creatures in the water hissed and writhed, their forms dissolving back into the blackness. But the heart's whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. "You'll never escape," it taunted. "You're mine now." Evelyn ignored it, focusing all her energy on reaching the center of the whirlpool. The boat was now so close to the edge that she could feel the spray of the churning water on her face. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her arms felt like they were on fire, but she refused to give up. Finally, she reached the edge. The boat teetered precariously, the black void yawning before her. Evelyn took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she opened the chest. The heart of the abyss pulsed with a malevolent light, its dark tendrils reaching out as if to grab her. "This ends now," she whispered. She lifted the crystal, its weight heavy in her hands, and held it over the edge of the boat. The heart's whispers became a deafening roar, its energy surging through her like an electric current. She could feel it fighting her, trying to force her to drop the key instead. But Evelyn was stronger. With a cry of defiance, she threw the heart into the abyss. For a moment, nothing happened. The crystal disappeared into the black void, and the whirlpool continued to churn. Evelyn's heart sank. Had she failed? And then, with a deafening roar, the water began to churn even faster. The boat was pulled into the vortex, spinning wildly as it was dragged downward. Evelyn clung to the sides, her vision blurring as the world around her became a whirl of black and blue. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the whirlpool stopped. The water stilled, and the boat came to a halt. Evelyn gasped for breath, her body trembling with exhaustion. She looked around, her eyes wide with disbelief. The abyss was gone. The water was calm, the sky clear. The heart of the abyss had been destroyed. The aftermath. Evelyn sat in the small rowboat, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The stillness around her was almost surreal after the chaos of the whirlpool. The black void of the abyss was gone, replaced by the calm, blue expanse of the Caribbean Sea. The heart of the abyss had been destroyed, but the weight of what she had just done still pressed heavily on her shoulders. She looked down at the key of the abyss, still clutched tightly in her hand. The symbols etched into its surface had faded, as if the power that had once flowed through it was now spent. Evelyn tucked it into her pocket, her mind racing. She had done it. She had thrown the heart into the abyss. But what did that mean for the crew of the Crimson Cutlass? Had the curse been broken? As if in answer, a faint glow caught her eye. She turned to see the pirate ship approaching, its tattered sails billowing in the wind. The crew stood on the deck, their glowing eyes fixed on her. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Were they free, or had the destruction of the heart only made things worse? The captain stood at the helm, his expression unreadable. As the ship drew closer, he called out to her. "Dr. Marlowe, are you unharmed?" Evelyn nodded, though her voice was shaky. "I'm fine. The heart is gone. I threw it into the abyss." The captain's glowing eyes flickered, and for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw a flicker of hope in his gaze. "Then the curse should be broken," he said. "But we must be certain." Evelyn rowed the small boat back to the ship, her arms aching with every stroke. When she reached the side of the Crimson Cutlass, the crew lowered a rope ladder, and she climbed aboard. The pirates watched her in silence, their glowing eyes filled with a mixture of anticipation and fear. The captain stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his cutlass. "The heart is gone," he said, his voice carrying across the deck. "But the curse may still hold us. We must test it." Evelyn frowned. How? The captain drew his cutlass and held it out to her. Strike me, he said. If the curse is broken, I will bleed as a mortal man. If not... Evelyn hesitated, her stomach churning at the thought. I can't just stab you, she protested. The captain's expression hardened. You must. If the curse remains, we are doomed to this half-life forever. Do it, Dr. Marlowe. For all of us. Evelyn took a deep breath, her hand trembling as she reached for the cutlass. The crew watched in silence, their glowing eyes filled with a desperate hope. She gripped the hilt tightly and raised the blade, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm sorry, she whispered. With a swift motion, she brought the blade down, slicing across the captain's arm. He didn't flinch, his glowing eyes fixed on the wound. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, to Evelyn's astonishment, blood began to seep from the cut. Red, human blood. The crew erupted into cheers, their voices filled with a joy that had been absent for centuries. The captain stared at his arm, his expression one of disbelief. It's over, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The curse is broken. Evelyn felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. The ship began to tremble, the wooden planks groaning as if under immense strain. The crew's cheers turned to cries of alarm as the deck beneath their feet began to crack and splinter. What's happening? Evelyn shouted, clutching the railing for support. The captain's expression darkened. The ship was bound to the heart, he said. Without it, it cannot survive. We must abandon it now. Evelyn's heart raced as the crew scrambled to lower the lifeboats. The ship was coming apart, its ancient timbers unable to withstand the strain. She helped the crew into the boats, her hands shaking as she worked. The captain was the last to leave, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Thank you, Dr. Marlowe, he said as he climbed into the lifeboat. You have given us a second chance. Evelyn nodded, though her mind was still reeling. As the lifeboats rowed away from the sinking ship, she watched as the Crimson Cutlass was swallowed by the sea. The tattered sails disappeared beneath the waves, and the ship was gone. The crew was silent as they rowed toward the oceanic explorer, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and grief. Evelyn sat in the lifeboat, her mind racing. The curse was broken, but what did that mean for the crew? They were no longer bound to the heart, but they were still out of time. Men from the 1700s stranded in the modern world. When they reached the research vessel, Evelyn's team helped the crew aboard, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. The captain approached Evelyn, his glowing eyes now dimmed to a faint, human light. What will happen to us now? He asked. We are men out of time, with no place in this world. Evelyn hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll figure it out, she said. You've been given a second chance. We'll make sure it's not wasted. The captain nodded, though his expression was still troubled. Evelyn turned to her team, her voice firm. We need to contact the authorities. These men need help, medical attention, documentation, everything, and we need to keep this quiet. The world isn't ready to know about the heart of the abyss. Her team nodded, though their faces were pale. Evelyn took a deep breath, her mind already racing with the implications of what had happened. The heart was gone, but its legacy would linger. And she knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. The ocean was vast and full of secrets, and the heart was just one of them. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the calm waters, Evelyn stood at the railing of the oceanic explorer, her eyes fixed on the spot where the Crimson Cutlass had disappeared. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but she knew that the sea would always hold more mysteries and more dangers, and she would be ready for them. A new beginning. The oceanic explorer cut through the calm waters of the Caribbean, its crew bustling with activity. The rescued pirates of the Crimson Cutlass were now aboard, their presence a surreal reminder of the events that had transpired. Evelyn stood on the deck, her arms crossed as she watched the horizon. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden light over the ocean, but her mind was far from at ease. The captain, whose name she had learned was William Black Bill Harlow, approached her. His once glowing eyes were now a deep human brown, and his demeanor had softened considerably since the curse was broken. Still, there was a weight to his presence, a reminder of the centuries he had spent trapped in a state of suspended animation. "Dr. Marlowe," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "we owe you our lives, but I fear our troubles are far from over." Evelyn turned to him, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Black Bill gestured to the other pirates, who were huddled together on the deck, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion as they observed the modern technology of the oceanic explorer. "We are men out of time," he said. "The world we knew is gone. We have no place in this new age." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. She had already considered this problem, but hearing it voiced aloud made it all the more urgent. "We'll figure something out," she said. "But first, we need to get you all to safety. My team is working on contacting the authorities, but we need to be careful. If word gets out about who you are or what you are, it could cause a panic." Black Bill's expression darkened. "And if your authorities decide we are a threat, what then?" Evelyn met his gaze, her voice firm. "I won't let that happen. You've been through enough. But we need to be smart about this. For now, we'll keep your identities a secret. We'll say you're survivors of a shipwreck. It's not entirely untrue." Black Bill nodded, though his eyes still held a hint of skepticism. "And what of the heart? Do you believe it is truly gone?" Evelyn hesitated. She had asked herself the same question countless times since throwing the crystal into the abyss. The heart's destruction had seemed final, but something about it nagged at her. The way it had pulsed with energy, the way it had whispered to her. It felt too powerful to simply disappear. "I don't know," she admitted. "But for now, we have to focus on the present. We'll deal with the heart or whatever's left of it, if it becomes a problem." As the oceanic explorer made its way to the nearest port, Evelyn worked tirelessly to coordinate with her team and the authorities. The story they crafted was simple. The pirates were survivors of a shipwreck, found adrift and in need of medical attention. It was a plausible enough explanation, and the authorities seemed to accept it without question. When they arrived at the port, a team of paramedics was waiting to take the pirates to a nearby hospital. Evelyn watched as Black Bill and his crew were led away, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She knew their journey was far from over, but at least they were safe for now. As the last of the pirates was loaded into an ambulance, Evelyn's phone buzzed. It was a message from her team's lead researcher, Dr. Marcus Lee. "We need to talk. Now." Evelyn's stomach churned as she made her way to the ship's lab. Marcus was waiting for her, his face pale and his hands trembling as he held a small device. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, her voice tight with worry. Marcus handed her the device, a portable spectrometer. "I've been analyzing the readings from the abyss," he said. "When you threw the heart into the vortex, there was a massive energy spike. I thought it was just the crystal being destroyed, but look at this." Evelyn took the device and stared at the screen. The readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. The energy spike had been followed by a series of smaller pulses, each one growing stronger over time. It was as if the heart's destruction had triggered something deep within the ocean. "What does this mean?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not over. The abyss, it's alive, and it's waking up." Evelyn's mind raced as she processed Marcus's words. The heart of the abyss had been destroyed, but its influence, or perhaps its creator, was still out there. The ocean, vast and unknowable, held secrets that even she could barely comprehend. And now those secrets were stirring. She turned to Marcus, her voice firm. "We need to keep this quiet. If word gets out, it could cause a panic. And we need to find out what's happening. If the abyss is waking up, we need to be ready." Marcus nodded, though his face was pale. "What about the pirates? Do they know anything that could help us?" Evelyn hesitated. Black Bill and his crew had been bound to the heart for centuries. If anyone knew the truth about the abyss, it was them. "I'll talk to them," she said. But for now, we need to focus on gathering as much data as we can. Whatever's coming, we need to be prepared. As Evelyn left the lab, her mind was filled with a sense of foreboding. The heart of the abyss was gone, but its legacy remained. And she knew, deep down, that the ocean's secrets were far from exhausted. The abyss awakens. Evelyn stood on the deck of the Oceanic Explorer, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun had set, and the ocean was now a vast, dark expanse, its surface shimmering faintly under the light of the moon. The crew was quiet, the weight of what they had discovered hanging heavy in the air. The abyss was waking up, and Evelyn knew they were running out of time. She turned to Marcus, who was standing beside her, his face pale and drawn. "We need to talk to Black Bill," she said. "If anyone knows what's happening, it's him." Marcus nodded, though his expression was uneasy. "Do you think he'll help us?" Evelyn hesitated. Black Bill and his crew had been through hell, and she wasn't sure how much they were willing to risk. But they were the only ones who had first-hand knowledge of the heart and the abyss. She had to try. The hospital was quiet when Evelyn and Marcus arrived. The pirates had been placed in a private wing, their presence kept secret from the public. Black Bill was sitting by the window when Evelyn entered his room, his eyes distant as he stared out at the night sky. "Captain Harlowe," Evelyn said, her voice soft but firm. "We need your help." Black Bill turned to her, his expression unreadable. "What is it now, Dr. Marlowe? Haven't we been through enough?" Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "The abyss is waking up. We don't know what's happening, but we think it has something to do with the heart. You've been bound to it for centuries. If anyone knows how to stop this, it's you." Black Bill's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Evelyn thought he might refuse. But then he sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "The heart was never just a crystal," he said. "It was a key to something far greater. The abyss is not just a trench in the ocean. It's a gateway." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "A gateway to what?" Black Bill's expression darkened. "To another world, a world of darkness and chaos. The ancient civilization that created the heart believed it could control the gateway, but they were wrong. The heart was a prison, designed to keep whatever lies beyond the abyss from entering our world. And now that it's gone," Evelyn's stomach churned as the implications of his words sank in. "You're saying the destruction of the heart opened the gateway?" Black Bill nodded. "And if the abyss is waking up, it means something is trying to come through." Evelyn's mind raced as she processed the information. The heart had been a prison, and she had unwittingly destroyed it. Now, something was trying to break through the gateway, something that had been trapped for centuries. "We need to close the gateway," she said, her voice firm. "But how?" Black Bill hesitated, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "There is a way. The ancient civilization created a second key, a counterpart to the heart. It was hidden on the same island where we found the heart. If we can find it, we might be able to seal the gateway." Evelyn's heart leapt with hope. "Do you know where the island is?" Black Bill nodded. "I can take you there, but the journey will be dangerous. The island is cursed, and the key is guarded by things that should not exist." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Marcus, who looked equally apprehensive. But they had no choice. If the gateway wasn't sealed, the consequences could be catastrophic. "We'll go," Evelyn said, "but we'll need your crew. They've been through this before. They know what we're up against." Black Bill's expression hardened. "My crew has suffered enough, but if it means saving this world, they will follow me. We'll leave at dawn." The journey to the island was tense. The Oceanic Explorer sailed through the night, its crew on high alert. Evelyn stood at the helm beside Black Bill, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The island loomed in the distance, its jagged cliffs rising like teeth from the ocean. As they approached, the air grew colder, and the water turned an unnatural shade of black. The crew grew uneasy, their whispers filled with fear. Evelyn could feel the weight of the island's curse pressing down on her, but she forced herself to remain focused. When they reached the shore, Black Bill led the way, his cutlass drawn. The island was barren and desolate, its landscape twisted and unnatural. The ground was littered with bones, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. "The key is in the temple," Black Bill said, his voice low. "But be warned, the guardians will not let us take it easily." As they approached the temple, a low growl echoed through the air. Evelyn's heart pounded as shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. Creatures that seemed to be made of pure darkness, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Stay close," Black Bill said, his voice firm. "And whatever you do, don't look into their eyes." The battle was fierce. The guardians were fast and relentless, their claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. Evelyn and Marcus stayed behind Black Bill and his crew, their weapons drawn as they fought their way to the temple. When they finally reached the inner chamber, Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The second key was there, resting on a pedestal in the center of the room. It was a mirror image of the heart, its surface swirling with a pure, radiant light. "This is it," Black Bill said, his voice filled with awe. "The key of light." Evelyn stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached for the key. But before she could touch it, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber. The guardians had followed them, their eyes filled with rage. "Take the key," Black Bill shouted. "We'll hold them off." Evelyn grabbed the key, its light flooding the chamber. The guardians hissed and recoiled, their forms dissolving into shadows. But more were coming, their numbers endless. "Run," Black Bill shouted. "We'll meet you at the ship." Evelyn and Marcus didn't hesitate. They ran through the temple, the key's light guiding their way. When they reached the shore, the oceanic explorer was waiting, its crew ready to set sail. As the ship pulled away from the island, Evelyn looked back, her heart heavy with worry. Black Bill and his crew were still on the shore, fighting off the guardians. She wanted to go back for them, but she knew they had done their part. Now it was up to her. The journey to the abyss was tense. The key's light grew brighter as they approached, its energy pulsing with a rhythm that matched the churning of the water. When they reached the edge of the vortex, Evelyn stood at the helm, the key clutched tightly in her hands. "This is it," she said, her voice firm. "We seal the gateway, or we die trying." With a deep breath, she threw the key into the abyss. The light exploded, flooding the ocean with a radiant glow. The vortex shuddered, its churning waters slowing as the gateway began to close. And then, with a deafening roar, the abyss was sealed. The ocean was calm once more, its surface reflecting the light of the rising sun. Evelyn stood on the deck of the Oceanic Explorer, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. The gateway was closed, but the cost had been high. Black Bill and his crew had sacrificed themselves to ensure the key was retrieved. As the ship sailed away from the abyss, Evelyn felt a sense of closure. The heart of the abyss was gone, its curse lifted. But she knew the ocean would always hold secrets, secrets that she would continue to uncover. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment of peace. The storm had passed, and the world was safe, and that was enough.